Every time I sat down to dinner at my future in-laws, I would wake up on their living room sofa with no memory of how I got there. My bag would be on the floor instead of on the chair where I always left it. My phone would be on the wrong side of the cushion. My fiancé always said the same thing: long week, too much wine, you need to slow down. Then I checked the security log on my government-issued laptop, and I understood that slowing down was the last thing I was going to do. Before I go any further, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever felt like something was deeply wrong but couldn't find the words to prove it yet, hit like and subscribe. My name is Jade. I'm 28 years old and I work as a federal cybersecurity analyst for a defense contracting firm just outside of Washington, D.C. I hold a top-secret clearance. My job is finding intrusions in government networks before anyone else does, and I'm very good at it. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Roanoke, Virginia, with a mother who worked double shifts at a hospital and a father who drove long-haul trucks 6 days a week. I put myself through college on loans and scholarships. Every certification on my wall, every dollar in my savings account, I built it myself, from scratch, the way you do when there's no safety net underneath you. I tell you this not to brag, but because you need to understand why this family chose me. They didn't pick me at random. They picked me for exactly what I'd spent a decade building. Rowan was everything I wasn't used to. Tall, confident, quietly powerful in the way that men are when they've never had to prove anything to anyone. He came from old money in McLean, Virginia, the kind of family whose name appeared on a wing of a hospital and an endowed scholarship at a private school my entire neighborhood couldn't have pointed to on a map. We met at a charity auction for a veterans housing nonprofit. He remembered details I mentioned once in passing. He sent flowers that weren't from a grocery store. I thought I had finally found someone steady, someone safe. His family was a different education entirely. His mother, Cecily, had the particular gift of making you feel like an inconvenience in a room you'd been invited into. Gracious on the surface, the right pearls, the right laugh, but underneath it, a current of cold assessment that never shut off. His father, Warren, was a real estate developer who'd built a name in Northern Virginia, acquiring government-adjacent properties and turning them into high-end, mixed-use developments. He talked about it at every dinner as if reciting scripture. His sister Petra was 32 and had the specific brand of boredom that money buys: sharp, decorative, occasionally cruel for entertainment. Her husband Knox worked in private equity, talked constantly about cryptocurrency and tax optimization, and always watched me a beat too long when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I noticed that from the very beginning. I filed it away. The blackouts started at the third Sunday dinner. It wasn't the normal sleepy heavy feeling of a long week catching up with me. It was a specific quality of darkness, like the floor dropping out from beneath my thoughts. I would have Cecily's hand-picked Bordeaux, maybe a bowl of the seafood bisque she always brought out of the kitchen herself, specifically for me, and within 40 minutes I was gone. I'd come back on the sofa, shoes off, coat folded, bag on the floor. Rowan would be beside me with water and a voice full of gentle concern that, looking back, had no warmth in it at all. The third time it happened, I noticed my laptop bag had been unzipped. The government machine inside, encrypted, biometrically locked, secured to a level most people never interact with, was shifted to the outer edge of the bag instead of packed flat the way I always left it. The zipper pull was on the wrong side. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the laptop and pulled the security event log. 3 failed biometric authentication attempts, timestamped to a 40-minute window that matched exactly when I would have been unconscious on their sofa. I didn't call Rowan. I called my most trusted colleague from work and I told her everything. She didn't suggest I was overthinking it. She said, "Get a blood test tonight, Jade, not tomorrow. Tonight." I drove to an urgent care clinic at 10:30 that evening and paid cash for a comprehensive toxicology panel. I specifically requested benzodiazepine screening. The results arrived 48 hours later. A compound consistent with an externally administered sedative was present in my bloodstream. Not a prescription I held, not alcohol. Something that had been given to me without my knowledge. I sat in my car in a parking garage and read the result 3 times. Then I started working. I ordered a piece of surveillance equipment I'd encountered in a federal training simulation. A high-definition camera no larger than a hair clip, with a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a whisper from across a room. I tested the footage angle in my apartment for 2 evenings. I set it to sync to a private cloud server I created on a separate device with no connection to anything traceable to me. and then I accepted the invitation to the next Sunday dinner. I wore my hair half up. I brought my laptop in my bag as always. I sat at Cecily's mahogany table and smiled through every word she said, including the moment she told Warren's attorney that I had come from very modest beginnings. But Rowan had always had a generous spirit. I watched Knox refill wine glasses. I accepted the bisque when Cecily set it in front of me herself, beaming with that practiced hostess warmth. I excused myself shortly after, said I needed to use the restroom, walked down the hallway, and quietly got rid of every drop I had just been handed. I went back to the table and I performed. I let my eyelids droop. I let my sentences trail into nothing. I let my posture soften and my head tilt the way it would if something were pulling me under. Rowan was at my side within minutes, arm around my waist, his voice projecting concern for the benefit of the room. He walked me to the living room sofa and laid me down against the cushions. I let every muscle go completely limp. The glass doors to the hallway clicked shut. The dinner party sounds muffled. For a few long seconds there was nothing. Then Cecily's voice came through the quiet, and it was not the voice she used at the table. This one was stripped down to its actual structure, flat, cold, efficient. Knox, the laptop is in her bag, we have 20 minutes. I heard him cross the room, heard the zip of my bag, heard him set the machine on the coffee table. Biometric lock again, he said. I need her face. Then use it, Cecily said. Petra's heels clicked over to the sofa. Her fingers brushed my hair aside. The touch was practiced, not gentle. I felt the faint warmth of the laptop screen near my face. Knox had lifted the machine toward me. The security voice I had programmed myself spoke clearly from the speakers. Biometric authentication failed. Retinal dilation not detected. Please open eyes to continue. Knox exhaled hard through his nose. The pupil scan requires a conscious retinal response, he said, his voice low and tight. I can't override it. Then we do it the other way, Cecily said. Petra, your phone. What came next I had known was coming and had made myself ready for. I stayed perfectly still while Knox settled his weight onto the sofa beside me, while his arm slid across my waist, while Petra circled us with her phone, adjusting angles, telling him to move his hand lower, telling him to lean toward my neck. The camera clicked quietly in the room, 10 times. Maybe 15. Rowan did not say a word. He was standing by the hallway entrance and he said absolutely nothing. Good, Cecily finally said. Those go to her employer, her clearance office, and her entire professional network if she doesn't cooperate. A federal contractor photographed in a compromising position with her future brother-in-law will lose her clearance within 2 weeks. Without the clearance, she has nothing. What if she goes to the police? Petra asked. Cecily's voice was patient, the way a teacher's voice is patient with a slow student. She passed out at dinner, she was overheated. Knox was helping her. It's her word against this family. Knox put my laptop back in the bag and rezipped it carefully. The real issue is Thursday, he said. The HUD auditors are reviewing the Meridian Park contracts. Dad's phantom equity position in the LLC is going to appear in the disclosures. $4 million. That's what they'll find. Rowan cleared his throat. Her clearance level includes read-write access to the federal contractor audit portal, he said. His voice was even, entirely matter of fact. I confirmed that 6 months ago. She can log a correction notation and re-classify the flag as an administrative error. They'll close the inquiry. 6 months ago. We had been together for 6 months and 2 weeks when I first met his family. I stayed still and I listened. I heard Knox explain that Cecily's name was on a secondary set of loan documents, that she was a silent guarantor on properties Warren had used as collateral without actually owning them outright. I heard Petra ask about the Veterans Nonprofit Board. I heard Knox say the audit committee would never look closely because he had personally selected every member of it. And then Knox said something that turned the fear I'd been managing into something colder and far more focused. The Meridian Park shortfall didn't only come from Warren's side, he said. I moved $300,000 from the Veterans Forward Fund in October to cover the deposit. Another $250,000 in January for the permit fees. The nonprofit's quarterly report is due next month, and the gap is not closable before the board meeting. Silence. Knox, Cecily said. I'm handling it, he said. Once she clears the federal flag, I redirect the construction loan before anyone pulls the nonprofit accounts. He had been stealing from a veterans' housing charity, the same charity where Rowan and I had met. I counted to 30 in my head, then I groaned softly and shifted my legs. The room restructured itself around me in about 4 seconds, people moving quickly to positions, voices arranging themselves back into the correct registers. I sat up slowly. I made my eyes look confused. I looked down at my blouse and let the horror on my face be real, because what they had done to my body while I lay there was real. Rowan was beside me, voice gentle, hand on my shoulder. He said I'd gotten overheated. He said the bisque was rich and I hadn't eaten enough before we arrived. I let him drive me home. In the elevator to my apartment, I kept my face to the wall. He talked the whole way up, told me I needed to reduce my hours, that the stress was affecting my judgment, that his mother had been worried about me. I cataloged every word. When he left, I locked the door, sat down at my secondary laptop, and went to work. The government machine had logged the biometric attempts again. This time, the security protocol had done what I'd hoped. It had recorded the MAC addresses of every active wireless device within 10 feet during the authentication window. I pulled the log, 3 devices, Cecily's smartwatch, Petra's phone, the same phone she'd used to take those photographs, and Knox's personal device, an encrypted model, but encryption doesn't make you invisible to someone who knows what they're doing. By midnight, I had his external IP address. By 2 in the morning, I had his browser history, his financial application data, and the transaction records for an offshore LLC registered in the Cayman Islands. The wire transfers from Veterans Forward matched the LLC's inbound deposits almost exactly in amount and timing. October, January, March. Knox had run the money through 3 decentralized crypto exchanges in sequence, the same basic layering pattern I'd seen in federal training seminars. He thought it was sophisticated. From where I was sitting, it was careless. I built the dossier through the rest of the night. Hidden camera footage, every word of Cecily's instructions, Knox's plan, Rowan's confirmation that he had researched my clearance level 6 months prior, the blood toxicology report, the security event logs from my laptop, the MAC address capture placing Knox's DOS device at the scene of the biometric breach, the offshore transaction trail connecting him to the nonprofit theft, the HUD contract filings showing the phantom equity position. I opened the secure email portal, drafted a message to the FBI's Northern Virginia field office, and carbon copied the HUD Office of Inspector General and the Department of Labor's Employee Benefits Security Administration. I attached the dossier and the decryption key. I set the email to send automatically at 7 o'clock Friday evening. Friday night was the Veterans Forward annual gala. Knox chaired it every year. Warren sat on the honorary board. Cecily wore a different designer gown to it each time. I had 3 days to wait and 3 days to perform. I called Rowan the next morning and I cried, because some of it was real and the rest I had access to. I told him I was ashamed of the scene I'd caused, that I wanted to make things right with his family. I heard the satisfaction settle into his voice immediately. He told me to come to the gala Friday, that it would be my opportunity to show his parents I was serious. I said I would. I said I was so grateful he was patient with me. I hired 2 private security contractors on Thursday. I told them exactly what might happen and at what moment. I paid them in full in advance. Friday evening, I put on a navy dress, the color I wear when I mean business, the color I had worn to every clearance interview I'd ever passed. I drove to the Ashby estate. I handed my keys to the valet. I walked through the front doors of a grand room full of 200 people who had no idea what was about to happen in the next 20 minutes. Cecily found me within moments. She introduced me to a city councilman as the girl who's shown Rowan that the other side of the tracks has its charms. She introduced me to a defense lobbyist as Rowan's government girlfriend. I smiled through all of it and kept one hand loosely on my clutch, which held a flash drive with a complete copy of the dossier. Knox was at the podium, thanking donors for their generosity to veterans' families across Northern Virginia. He shook hands with a retired Army general in the front row and smiled like someone whose conscience had never once troubled him. Rowan put his hand on my back at 7 minutes to 7 and told me it was time. They brought me to the stage. Rowan stepped to the microphone and told the room there was a special announcement that his future wife had decided to make a public show of her commitment to the Ashby Family Trust and to Veterans Forward. He handed me the microphone. I looked out at the room. I set my clutch on the podium, removed the flash drive, and plugged it into the AV input. "Thank you," I said. "I do want to make a statement." The display screen behind me, running a soft loop of smiling veterans and ribbon cuttings, went black for half a second. Then it filled with the first photograph Petra had taken. Me on the leather sofa, Knox pressed against my side, my blouse open, his hand across my waist, projected 20 feet high in high definition, in a room full of the most influential people this family had ever assembled. The room went completely silent. I stepped away from the podium before Cecily could close the distance. "What you're looking at is not what it appears to be," I said, moving slowly across the stage. "That photograph was taken by my future sister-in-law while I was unconscious on their sofa. I was unconscious because someone in this family had been putting a sedative compound in my food at Sunday dinners for months. I have the toxicology report. I have the blood work with the date and the chain of custody. I have all of it." Knox moved toward the side exit. Two of the retired officers near the back wall stepped into his path without anyone asking them to. They'd served 30 years between them. They knew how to read a room. "I also want to direct your attention," I said, pressing the arrow key on my laptop, "to these wire transfer records. $570,000 moved from the Veterans Forward Charitable Fund into an offshore LLC in the Cayman Islands. These transfers occurred under the direct financial management of the man who just thanked you all for your generosity to veterans' families." The retired general stood up from his seat in the front row. Knox tried to force his way past the men blocking the side exit and went absolutely nowhere. My two security contractors stepped out from behind the stage curtain. He saw them and stopped moving. Rowan came across the stage for me with his face showing me something I had never seen in 2 years, the actual thing underneath the charm. He reached for the microphone and one of my contractors caught him by the collar and walked him backward like he was nothing, which to a man who had done 2 tours in the army, he essentially was. Cecily stood at the edge of the stage gripping the curtain with both hands. Warren was still in his seat in the front row, but a woman in a dark blazer had appeared beside him and placed her hand on his shoulder in a way that was not ceremonial. The front doors opened 3 minutes later. 6 federal agents walked in. I handed the field supervisor a physical copy of the dossier from my clutch. He looked at it, looked at me, and gave me a single nod. Knox was arrested at the side exit for wire fraud and criminal misappropriation of charitable funds. Warren was taken from his chair for federal housing fraud and criminal conspiracy. Rowan was arrested for his role in orchestrating the drugging, the coercion, and the attempted unauthorized access to a secured federal contractor system. Cecily sat down on the edge of the stage steps and stayed there while the room emptied around her. The general was on his phone before the agents had finished reading the charges. The journalists who had been invited to cover the gala were recording. The city councilman Cecily had introduced me to earlier slipped out a side door and did not say goodbye to anyone. I walked down off the stage and out through the front doors. The night was cold and the air was clean, and I stood on the stone steps for a moment and just breathed. 6 months later, Knox received 19 years in federal prison. Warren pled guilty to 4 counts of HUD fraud and received 12 years. Rowan was convicted on charges including criminal conspiracy, administering a controlled substance without consent, and attempted unauthorized access to a government system, 9 years. Petra filed for divorce the week after Knox's arrest. She's somewhere on the Gulf Coast now, from what I understand, and the life she had before is entirely gone. The McLean estate was seized in federal asset forfeiture proceedings to cover partial restitution. The neighborhood Cecily had spent 3 decades constructing appearances in watched padlocks go on the iron gate. She's renting a 2-bedroom in a suburb she used to make subtle jokes about. I won't pretend that particular detail doesn't satisfy me. Veterans Forward was placed under new independent governance. A portion of the stolen funds was recovered through liquidation of Knox's assets. The veterans' housing projects he had quietly stalled are moving forward again. I left my contracting firm 8 months ago. I now run my own cybersecurity consulting practice, and my first major client was a coalition of veterans service organizations that needed someone they could trust to audit their financial oversight systems. I took that contract specifically. I work from a corner office with a window that looks out over a city I used to visit by bus because I couldn't afford to live in it. They targeted me because they believed my career made me a useful tool. What they never accounted for was that the same skills they wanted to steal from me were exactly the skills I would use to take them apart. If someone has ever tried to make you doubt your own instincts, if you've been told your evidence is paranoia, that what you know happened to you is something you imagined, document everything. Get the blood test, trust your body, and don't show your hand until the room is full and there's nowhere for them to go. If this story stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to Bunny Revenge. Tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone completely, only to find out they'd been working against you from the very beginning?